And so if I'm an unfamiliar face to you, my name's Mac Matthews. I have the joy of serving as one of the pastors here at Harvest Ridge. We are so thankful that you're here this morning, particularly if it's not a normal rhythm for you to gather with our church family. We're so glad you're here. And if we can do anything to help you feel connected, to help you take your next step in following Jesus, we want to do just that. I'd love to meet you personally. I find myself before and after every service out at the tent outside. As long as it doesn't rain, even if it does rain, I might brave it. I care about you that much. I need you to know that. We have spent the last 6 weeks in a series looking at the prayers of the Apostle Paul. And with the 3 weeks we have left gathering in this space before our transition to Wheat Ridge High School, we want to capitalize on these 3 weeks. From my perspective, there's nothing more valuable that we could talk about than what the New Testament lays out as how God's church, by God's design, is to be led. And so what we're going to do, as you can see from the text we've read this morning, we're going to look at elders, an office that the New Testament gives us. And in a couple weeks, we'll look at deacons, an office the New Testament gives us, without which God's church cannot thrive, cannot be led as God intends. As we get started, I want to ask you a question. It's rhetorical in the sense that if you yell it out, you'll be in the minority, but it's not rhetorical in the sense that I really want you to have someone who comes to mind. You guys with me? Who is the best leader you have ever been around? Someone you've known, not someone you've seen from afar, but you know their life up close and personal. Let me give you a second. Really want you to think about it. I meant that. You see, friends, is that there's the chance that as you think about that question, several people come to mind. I hope you have lived in such a way that at least someone comes to mind. If your knee-jerk reaction is like, I've never met anyone worth their salt at leading, that's a tough way to go. My sincere apologies to you. You'll be underwhelmed by me as well, so you can buckle up for that. But there's kind of 2 directions we're prone to think in, right? The first is this, is that you might be thinking about one of the most competent people you've ever met. In your job or in your family or in some other organization, this is the individual that gets stuff done. He or she breaks the sales records. They find themselves pushing the team forward, always after the next mountain to climb, the goal or objective to accomplish. Or perhaps on the other side of the coin, or often related, you aren't thinking so much about competence, you're thinking about character. What came to mind for you was not the most successful person you've ever worked with or interacted with, but the most integrity-filled person that you know. Someone whose life and their lips matches up more often than not. Someone who does the right thing for the right reasons, even when there aren't people looking to make sure. Friends, the church in our day and age has been wrongly enamored, wowed by competence. We've thought to ourselves, that guy's impressive. Look at him go. Have you heard him talk? Do you see the way he strums the guitar? It's amazing. And what I want to set in front of you as we think about 1 Timothy 3, as we think about those as elders God would raise up to lead his church, is that competence matters very, very little. It's not to say it does not matter, but it is to say in comparison to character, it is in a different ballpark, a different conversation altogether. If you were at our member meeting last night, then you know in the life of our church, part of why we're talking about this is because we have 4 men going through a process for us to be able to discern, to ascertain if they are qualified for the office in the ways that 1 Timothy 3, Titus 1, another passage like that would speak to. For many of you in this room, as I've said, we're going to spend a few weeks talking about elders and deacons, and you've thought to yourself, well, I'm not an elder, I'm not a deacon. And Mac, I think what happened is you just gave me 3 weeks of permission to not really listen all that much, and maybe start planning for lunch after service today. I hear you. Let me ask you this, of even if you would never be, because the vast majority of people in the life of Harvest Ridge will not be people who ever serve as elders at our church. It's true. Same thing is true with deacons, right? That's not to say because there aren't people who are qualified for the role, but that's just how it works. If everybody gets to lead, then nobody really gets to lead, right? But if that's you and you find yourself thinking, what does this actually have to do with me? I want to set two things in front of you, all right? The first is this: the qualifications for elders that Timothy lays out that we are going to look at. They are what I would define as basic Christian maturity. We're prone to think of like, wow, if someone meets these qualifications, they are just head and shoulders above the rest. But when we read them, you will think to yourself, kind of sounds like every Christian is supposed to live like this. And when you think that, you'd be right. You're off to a great start. In the same way that I want to say to you, as we look at these qualities, relentlessly pursue them. Grind away for the sake of godliness to be the sort of men and sort of women described by these verses. Where at the same time, I want to say to you that you, the congregation, not me as our pastor, you hold the keys to determine which qualified men will serve in this office in the life of our church. And so if you care about Harvest Ridge, you care about the qualifications for elders. You care about making sure that there will never be a day when men who are great in competence, but lowly in character, get to lead this group of people. The Lord Jesus Christ died to save us. And therefore, the way that we lead his bride matters. Not just me, but for you as well. You might also be thinking to yourself, and I know this is a lengthy introduction. I've been out of the pulpit for a month, so you can just put your seatbelts right on for me. You might be thinking to yourself of like, Mac, I feel like authority, that's kind of like a 1990s thing. Did anyone tell you it's 2026? Leaders, people being in charge, right? Like if we're honest with ourselves, we live in a world that is like, don't tell me what to do. It doesn't matter what affiliations you have, where you hang out. Like the notion that someone's like, hey, do this. You're like, you don't know me like that. Don't for a second think that you can boss me around. And we have to be honest, in the church, not just in the world, we have seen abuses of the misuse and characterization of authority to the harm of people. It's important that you guys hear me say that out loud, right? Like I don't live under a rock most of the time. But I need you to know that doesn't mean that authority is bad. Do you know what that means? Authority used badly is bad. But authority used for the glory and purposes of God is good. It leads to flourishing. I want to read for you some of the last recorded words of King David from 2 Samuel 23, verses 3 and 4. David says, "The God of Israel spoke. The rock of Israel said to me," the one who rules the people with justice, rules, think leads, who rules in the fear of God, who lives in integrity and character, is like the morning light when the sun rises. Did you guys see the sunrise this morning? It was gorgeous. On a cloudless morning. The glisten of rain on sprouting grass. When people called by God lead according to God's design, people flourish. And that's why it's worthwhile for us to spend some time looking at these qualifications. I want you to walk away with one thing this morning. Above everything else, elders are men of character. Full stop. We're going to see this in 4 categories, but we're going to begin in verse 1 because it's important. Paul writing to Timothy in a context in which false teachers, those who are not qualified to serve in the office of elder, are emerging. And he writes and says this saying is trustworthy. If anyone aspires to be an overseer, he desires a noble work. In the New Testament, one of the things we have to be aware of is that an overseer, an elder, and a pastor are all three nouns to describe the same office. All right? Overseer, elder, pastor can be used interchangeably according to the New Testament. That probably means they should be used interchangeably according to the life of our church. And so Paul is saying if anyone desires that office, they desire a noble thing. How many men in the world do you know who have thought that it was more worthwhile to be in the C-suite of their company, but it was a lowly thing for them to lead God's people? And Paul turns that on his head. He says it's a worthwhile, a beautiful, a noble thing to aspire to this office. And that's why he goes on to set the qualifications of saying who they are. Read these in verse 2. This is who elders must be. An overseer, therefore, must be above reproach. It's kind of a catch-all category of Paul's going to go on to describe what that looks like, but it is to say that their lives have to be lived in such a way that there's no legitimate ability of anyone who observes them to say, hey, they don't measure up to one of these qualities that's going to come next. Right? We have to be clear. These are not aspirational. It's not like, man, it'd be really cool if the men who lead Harvest Ridge Church could be. No, it's the floor. They must be this way, above reproach, of beyond reasonable criticism. And secondly, he says they must be the husband of one wife. To be clear, that doesn't mean that unmarried brothers are not able to sit in a role like this. I find it really hard to believe that Paul, who never married, would be writing the qualifications for elders and he'd be like, I'm out, sorry. Find it hard to believe that if Jesus wanted to have served as an elder at a local church in his day, that he would have been unqualified for it. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around. But in their day and age, and still in some sense in our day and age, that's the norm of what happens to the majority of people. They live in marriage. They start a family. And that's okay if that's not where we're at in this room, but the New Testament in its time and culture expects that. And so Paul writes, he must be, translated quite literally, a one-woman man. In some sense, that kind of seems like the bar is a little bit low, right? Okay, elders don't cheat on their wives. Oh, wow, like Christians are really taking the ethics of the world seriously. But what he's describing is that men would live in such a way at home with their wives that there would be no observable sexual or other impropriety. Right? It isn't just to say don't sleep with someone who's not your spouse. It's to say don't be in a position where it could ever be perceived that something is happening that isn't above reproach. I wonder if you've thought this. It's something that I've chewed on before. I'm of the opinion that I can know most everything I need to know about the character of a man as I observe the way he interacts with his wife. Right? Man, you can fool a lot of people. We can look put together for a couple hours on a Sunday. But you can't fool your spouse. They know. They see. Kira sees the best of me. The best isn't very good. Kira sees the worst of me. The worst is very, very bad. Paul draws attention to elders must be the husband of one wife. They must prioritize and nurture their marriages for the glory of God. Secondly, he says elders must be self-controlled. We use that language often, right? Like it's a virtue that people, whether they're in the church or not, recognize the value of in our world. But think about what it means, right? We often think we're self-controlled when man, I don't grab another slice of pizza. And maybe you are, if the pizza is available, right? But what if the box of pizza is empty and you're like, yeah, look at me. Didn't take one. Pretty impressive, huh? That's not self-control. That's control that's guided by circumstance. To be self-controlled is to have the ability materially to have something or to want something, and by the grace and power of the Spirit of God alive in God's people to say, no, I'm good. That's not good for me. It gives me an occasion here to talk about something that's probably not talked about from the pulpit enough from my vantage point. One of the things that will keep many men who appear qualified to be elders in the life of the church from getting to serve in that role is the epidemic of pornography in our country and our culture. Oh my gosh, he said porn. This is not what I signed up for. Right? Like, let's level with each other. The statistics would say, and statistics are often underrepresented, that 70% of the men in this room and 30% of the women in this room have had a problem with pornography. Let that sit for a second. Right? That's not heaping condemnation. That's not judgment. It's acknowledging what's real. And that's one of the ways where self-control is going to play out in the lives of those God is raising up to lead in our church family. Because the truth is not a lot of people know what you watch on Netflix. Not a lot of people know what you look at on your phone. It's not controlled by others. It has to be controlled by the Spirit of God at work in our hearts and minds. You guys are awfully quiet. It's like we're being serious today. Paul continues, husband of one wife, self-controlled, sensible, right? Someone who would be observed by outsiders of making logical, common sense in some sense decisions, respectable, someone who not just among their church family, but as Paul will get to at the end, among outsiders is viewed as having virtues and qualities that are worthy of respect and admiration. Men who are kind. Men who are willing to have hard conversations. Men who love people enough to say hard things, but to do so in a way that you're not a jerk about it. Respectable. Men who don't live licentiously, who aren't greedy, respectable. Men qualified to be elders must be hospitable. That's interesting, isn't it? You're like, all right, Mac, I was tracking with you. But if we're honest, we come to hospitable, and you're like, what's he putting a quality that would more aptly describe a lady for in this list of virtues for qualified men? Some of you thought it. I know you said it. He doesn't say your wife must be hospitable. He says you must be hospitable. That is, willing to open your home for the sake of the gospel going forward. And as your pastor, let me just tell you from my vantage point, ladies far outpace brothers in a willingness to do this. What I more often see are ladies who want to use the spaces God has given them for the sake of the gospel, and husbands that are like, but the game's on that night. Oh, babe, again? I don't know. What are we going to talk about? Hospitality is one of the qualifications. Because, believe it or not, I'm aware of this. I'm going to let you guys in on a secret. Very little of what I say Sunday by Sunday does anybody remember. What a thought. But meaningful conversations where the ball moves forward, where lives get changed, they're often around the dinner table. Where people are engaged in each other's lives, where homes are open for lives to change. Paul continues, I got to keep us moving for the sake of time. An elder must be able to teach. This is the only competency that is listed in these 7 verses. It's the only skill that someone must have. Paul goes to great lengths to describe character, 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 and there is one piece of competency. It does not mean that someone who serves as an elder must be an individual who can preach from the pulpit 40 times a year. It's an unfair expectation to have of someone, of anyone. It does mean that an elder, qualified man must be able to sit with God's word open, to read it and from it to instruct other brothers and sisters. It's a large majority of the reason why a lot of men who have been nominated to be elders in the life of our church are home group leaders, Bible study table leaders. It's men who are already doing these things. Their qualities are observable. You don't have to have formal theological education. You have to be able to say, this is what the Bible says, and this is what I think it means for us today. And you have to have a life that matches up with your lips. You see, one of the things that I think has been so detrimental in our culture, that is evangelical culture, as we think about the qualifications for elders, is that if someone is really, really able to teach, uniquely capable as a communicator, then all of the quality things sort of become negotiable. Man, he gathers a crowd. Do you hear the way he draws people in, how enticing and compelling he is? Yeah, I get it. He's kind of a jerk. Yeah, no, he probably shouldn't have done that. But I mean, can you argue with the results? You see, able to teach is the only competency, but it's rooted in the character qualities that surround it. All right, I got to keep us moving. We've seen what an elder must be, but we need to see what an elder must not be, who they are not, beginning in verse 3. Not an excessive drinker. You guys know Kira and I, over the course of this month, I've been out of the pulpit, had the opportunity to get away. We went to a resort and really enjoyed our time there together. It was really sweet. We were getting on this golf cart on our last day there where the guy was driving us up to where our shuttle would bring us back to the airport. And the guy looked us in the eyes. I've never met this man before, right? He doesn't ask our name. He doesn't ask how our time was. He's like, were you drunk the whole time you were here? Sup, dog? My name's Mac. What a start. And what happened, I'm a little bit, on my heels at that moment. It's no. And then he gets really defensive. Well, what, it wasn't good enough for you? No, it's probably just not a good thing to do. But what it reminded me of is that we live in a culture where that is expected of people, right? It's normal. Oh man, you had one too many, but you slept it off. Really not that big of a deal. Paul says it is a big deal. The Bible says it is a big deal. It's the opposite of self-control to not be able to regulate ourselves in what we imbibe, that is alcohol. And therefore, Paul says these individuals who are to lead God's church in this way, they cannot be excessive drinkers. But he doesn't stop there. They cannot be bullies, but must be gentle. They can't be men who are insistent on getting their own way, willing to run over whoever stands in opposition to this vision they think that God has given them. They must be gentle. They must be shepherds. Do you see the difference in language that's being described between someone who might be successful in the world and someone who would be successful as an elder, a shepherd among the people of God? They can't just be insistent on getting their own ways. I said earlier that you know everything you need to know about a man when you see what happens when he interacts with his wife. You learn a lot about a man when something that he really cares about is set forward and someone else tells him no. Tells a story, doesn't it? When you don't get your way. I need you to know that the men that I mentioned are, I think, being raised up in the life of Harvest Ridge to begin to serve as elders, and that we're headed in that direction. They sit in the room where I'm trying to invest time and energy in them for a lot of reasons, but one of the most important ones is that in meaningful moments where I held all the cards and all the power as the individual who's the pastor of our church, they have put their necks on the line to say, Mac, we're not doing that. You got to know that. That matters. Not a bully, but gentle. I had a boss where I cut my teeth in ministry, and he had this phrase that has stuck in my head. I can't get rid of it. And he used to tell me, he would say, Mac, dictating is when people follow you because they have to. Leading is when people follow you because they want to. You hear that? Man, anyone who's just been given a little bit of power and authority, you can make people do what you want if you're willing to be a tyrant. But leaders compel people to follow them because of their character. Do you hear that? Do you feel that? It's tempting in a 6-month-old church plant in the day and age that we live in where it's like, but we just got to get stuff done. Sometimes gentleness is super inefficient. Did you know that? But it is the quality of King Jesus. What did he describe himself to be? He said, I am gentle and lowly in heart. So shame on us when brash, insensitive men who succeed in business but are lacking in character get to lead God's people. I need you to hear, not here. Don't let it be so. They must not be bullies, but gentle. And thirdly, they must not be quarrelsome nor greedy. We live in a very contentious day and age. It feels like people just like bickering more than they used to. That can't be true, but it feels that way. Not being quarrelsome doesn't mean that you can't be someone who ever has a minority opinion. As a lifelong holder of minority opinions, I'm very grateful for that. But what it does mean is that you can't be someone who fights for the sake of fighting. What the CSB translates as not quarrelsome in the original language is actually a positive word that we could translate as peaceable. One who lives at peace and fosters others living at peace with one another, who promotes and pursues the unity of God's people. And lastly, they must not be greedy. They can't be people who love money. They can't be people who are willing to set morals, character, and integrity aside just to make a buck. In Timothy's day, the Ephesian church that Timothy is leading and involved in, that Paul is writing about, that they were experiencing men who wanted to serve as elders because they thought that getting to preach and be in front of people would lead to them being rich. Let me tell you, in our day and age, I don't understand how that would play out. But don't allow men who are zealous for power, who are greedy for financial gain, to lead God's people. That's what Paul is pleading with Timothy in relation to. We've seen who they must be, who they must not be, and then Paul gets specific, verse 4, who they are at home. He must manage his own household competently and have his children under control with all dignity. If you're a particular makeup in terms of conscience, you're the dad of a young family in this room or the mom of a young family in this room as you're seeking to pursue these godly qualities, and you're like, well, I guess I'm out because there's a 3-year-old at home that is a tyrant. He's not talking about perfection. Kids are kids, right? But he's talking about progress and consistency. He's describing a household that is well managed and ordered in order that the people in it flourish. That their lives are marked by joy. That they walk into all that God has for them. It's not perfection. It's not to say just because your kids tell you no when you ask them to do something that means you're out. But it is to say that the direction he takes this in is that if you cannot manage your household, how can you lead the household of God? Right? If you can't get your family to listen and to be moving in the right direction, to be marked by certain characteristics and qualities, then how are you going to be able to do that in the life of a much messier church family? It is interesting. We're a part of a church planting network called Send Network that I'm super grateful for. It has led to many meaningful relationships with brothers and just people that I really value. And one of the things that they made us do in order to be a part of this network is that I went through a pretty lengthy assessment process where other men who were pastors and elders at local churches got to get their eyes on me over the course of time and to weigh in on, do we think that this man is qualified for this role? One, let me say this, we need more of that in our world, right? Let's start with that. But secondly, one of the things that was so funny to me is that Kira was really, really involved in this process. And if you know Kira at all, she was furious about this. I have to take 2 days off work to do what? For them to talk to you and I listen? Like, what are we doing here? And it's be easy to think that, like she's being scrutinized or under the microscope, but I actually think what was happening is they wanted to see who Kira was around me. Right? Like they wanted to see, does this woman flourish as her husband leads? Or does she start talking a lot and he doesn't say shut up, but his body language tells her to be quiet? Or does she have valuable thoughts to contribute and he tries to take them as his own and get credit for them? You see that? If men cannot manage their households in the way that God has called them to, then they are unfit in that season to be elders. Kira and I once belonged to a church in college where one of the godliest guys I know, so much respect for this man. He had adult children, not following Jesus, living in just waywardness according to God's design, and he took a step back from being an elder at that church. I don't know that anyone asked him to, but he looked at these lists and he thought, I am so zealous for the name of Christ to be famous and unbesmirched in our community that I don't want to give anyone any ammunition to look at my life and to say maybe I should have been doing something differently. He's been such an example to me in that. The home matters. Elders can't be men who are willing to give the leftovers to their family while their work in their church consumes all of their time. If I don't lead Kira well, if I don't care for those girls back there, I have no business leading here. And that's true for any man who would be called to serve in this role. We have seen who they are in family, and we will close with who they are in the world. Verse 6, he must not be a new convert, or he might become conceited and incur the same condemnation as the devil. Paul's clear, this isn't for people who have borne fruit or shown evidence of following Jesus for weeks or months. We're talking about years, right? Not flash in the pan, but consistency over years and decades. Isn't that a beautiful picture? Men and women, not as we think about elders, but just people serving in the life of our church who, Kira and I frequently have this joke that one of our goals in life is to spend as much time as possible with people who have walked with Jesus longer than we've been alive. There are a lot of brothers and sisters in this room that represent that, and I'm grateful for it. Who have decades of history, who are seasoned Christians of walking in the right direction. More often than not, men who are raised up to serve as elders in the life of a local church should be people that the congregation at large looks around and says, but I thought he was already doing that. He already leads like someone who's qualified to do. I just assumed that he was in that role already. Does that make sense? No one's surprised by it. It's obvious, it's evident to people. Verse 7, because I got to land the plane. Furthermore, he must have a good reputation among outsiders. so that he does not fall into disgrace in the devil's trap. It's easy in the context of 60 minutes a week to present our best selves in front of one another. And I'm guilty of this, right? I want you guys to think highly of me. There are warts and foibles in my life that those of you who see me up close see and recognize. But Paul says one of the qualifications for men to serve in this way is that they must be well thought of by outsiders. I think he means non-Christians. Right? That our lives would be exemplary in such a way that even people who hate the idea of who Jesus is and what he has come for, that they'd be like, yeah, that's a good guy. Let me just pause and ask us broadly for a second. Piece of application for us. The place where you spend the majority of your time, whether that's at work or whether that's in your home or whatever that might look like, would those people, would they say this about you? Right? Like, Veritas serum, lie detector test. Yeah, that's a respectable man. That's a respectable woman. Or would your colleagues say, I don't know, I've seen some stuff. Stuff that the church might not have seen based on where we are, but that the people who spend 40 to 50 hours a week with you every week have set their eyes on. You guys want to end with something hopeful? Feels kind of dour in here. The Christian life is never, ever, ever about earning. It's not about trying harder to be well thought of by God or by his people. That doesn't in any way lessen the qualities that we've just read. There's a rightful heaviness in this room because it matters. But no one gets to serve in the office of overseer, elder, pastor, remember all the same thing based on their own merits. You know who makes men and women like this? Jesus does. Because you see, Jesus came to seek and to save the lost. And you, by nature, I don't know all of us in this room, but I know many of us, you must believe today that apart from what Jesus has done for you and what he has done in you, that you are none of these things. Right? You have not valued. I have not valued marriage as I ought to. I have not been above reproach apart from Jesus. I'm not self-controlled. I'm not respectable. I don't lead my family well. None of those things are true, but Jesus comes on the scene. He lives righteously on behalf of sinners. He dies sacrificially in the death that I should die, and he's raised victorious on the third day. And he offers forgiveness to everyone who feels the weightiness. I don't measure up to these things. But that's not all that the gospel is. He then sends his Spirit and he changes people. I was with Jeremy and Elizabeth Hieronymus last night when we were bringing the trailers over here after our member meeting, and we were recounting and thinking about, I'm so grateful that I'm not the man I was a decade ago. And I want to ask you, as someone trying to lead in integrity, can you say that? Can you look at your life over the past 6 months, the past year, and say, God is doing something. He's making me new. Because those are the sort of individuals that, as we look at the Bible and at history, that God raises up to be useful to him in service. Brothers and sisters, pursue these qualities we've looked at this morning relentlessly. Encourage one another to pursue these relentlessly. The people in your home group, push them in the direction of living in light of them. And make sure that no one ever falls short of these qualities and is allowed to lead God's people here, myself first and foremost. Hold me to this standard. Hold other men to this standard. Because the fame of King Jesus in Wheat Ridge rides on the character of God's people. Would you pray with me?